The distress beacon came in at 0317 ship time, cutting through the silence of deep space like a cry in the middle of the night. I was on my third cup of recycled coffee. It tasted like metal and bad decisions, same as always, when the signal hit my neural overlay and read, Velhari colony vessel, Serenity of Stars, Krath boarding event, casualties confirmed, survivors, unknown. I set the cup down slowly. Around me, the crew of the U.S. Perseverance was already moving. That is the thing about humans. We do not pause and form committees the way other species do. The Charathi collective spent 11 minutes in discussion before deciding that the Velhari were a statistical loss. The Perevian Concordat sent formal messages of sympathy before the first enemy boot hit the deck of that ship. The Yenli observers parked themselves at a safe distance and began recording everything for their historical archives. We were already calculating how fast we could get there. Diaz, I called across the bay. Sergeant Jimena Diaz looked up from where she was taking apart a railgun with her bare hands, not because she needed to, but because it helped her think. She had a face that looked like it had been carved from a mountain and a build that matched. She had once carried an unconscious Corrigan beast over her shoulder for 600 meters on a bet. She won 17 credits and a story she still told at every bar we visited. Already heard it, she said. Krath? At least a war pack. Could be more. She smiled. It was not the kind of smile that made you feel safe. It was the kind that made you glad she was on your side. Good. 4 days sitting still was starting to make me restless. Okonkwo came out of the medical bay already pulling on his gear, moving the way he always moved. Steady, calm, unhurried. He was the kind of man who never ran because he had decided, at some point in his career, that running was for people who were not yet ready. He had once stitched a burn wound closed with one hand while returning fire with the other. He called it efficient use of time. Petrov came from somewhere near the back of the ship, smelling faintly of fuel, which was either a side effect of his job or simply part of who he was at this point. He had a detonator in one hand and a protein bar in the other, and he was wearing the smile he always wore when things were about to become interesting. Krath boarding action, he said, taking a cheerful bite. Do they know what they are dealing with? Does not seem like it, I said. His smile got wider. How exciting for them. We came out of faster-than-light travel, at 0412. The Serenity of Stars had once been a beautiful ship. Now it floated in the dark like a broken piece of glass. 3 holes burned through its hull where the Krath had forced their way inside, emergency lighting flickering in orange and red. Some escape pods had launched, but not many. The Velhari are a gentle people. They come from a low-gravity world and are built for thinking and creating, not for fighting. They write mathematics so advanced that human scientists have cried reading them. They make music in 7 harmonic layers at the same time. In almost every way that matters, they are remarkable. They are just not built for what was happening to them right now. The Krath are a different story. They come from a world called Krath Duno, volcanic, heavy with gravity, and home to an ecosystem where everything is trying to destroy everything else at all times. The Krath are big, fast, and covered in natural armor that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. They do not understand retreat in any meaningful way. They understand dominance, they understand strength, and they understand the fear of weaker creatures. Other species look at the Krath and feel afraid. I looked at them and thought, these remind me of the things that used to live in the caves back home. Because here is the thing about Earth. Sol 3, the pale blue planet, the place that made us. It is not a kind world. It never was. The gravity is high. The climate systems are violent enough to level cities. The ground shakes and splits open on a regular basis. The star at the center of our solar system gives you cancer if you stand in it too long without protection. And the life on Earth is astonishing in how many ways it has found to be dangerous. There are parasites that take over your brain. There are microbes that evolve faster than medicine can follow. There are creatures with teeth and venom and crushing strength, creatures that hunt in packs, and creatures that hunt alone. Creatures that are so patient in the way they wait for you that it feels almost personal. For about 3 million years, the ancestors of humanity were not at the top of that system. They were somewhere in the middle, trying to survive. Then they got smart, then they got organized, then they decided that they were not going to accept their position anymore, and they started climbing, one hard century at a time, until there was nothing left on Earth that humanity was afraid of. The Krath are apex hunters from a difficult world. We are apex hunters from a world that was harder, and we had the stubbornness to survive every single thing it threw at us. Docking in 90 seconds, Petrov announced from the front of the ship. 18 Krath biosignatures inside. Also, 31 Velhari, grouped in 2 locations, Cargo Bay 7 and the Rear Command Center. Survivors, Okonkwo said quietly. and there was something in his voice. Not surprise, exactly. Something quieter than that. Like the satisfaction of arriving exactly when you are needed. We split up, I said. Diaz, Petrov, move to the rear command center after we clear the main corridor. Okonkwo stays with me. We go to Cargo Bay 7 first. I checked my weapon. Ready. What matters? The Velhari go home. Everything else is a problem we solve on the way. Diaz rolled her neck until it made a sound like something snapping. Understood. The entry through the hull was not graceful. We blew the connector seal on a 3 count, and I went through first, because I am the senior person on this team, which means the dangerous openings are mine. The corridor beyond was dark except for emergency strips that painted everything in deep red, and the smell reached me immediately. Metal and burning plastic and something else I chose not to think about too carefully. The first Kroth came around the corner running at full speed. It was large, almost 7 feet of natural armor and muscle, 6-limbed, with 2 of those limbs raised and ready. It moved like something that had never been stopped before, because in its experience, it never had been. Every other creature it had ever encountered had made the correct survival decision, which was to create as much distance as possible as quickly as possible. I stepped toward it instead of away. This surprised it. In that small window of surprise, things were decided. I will not describe what happened in careful detail. Combat is not something that looks clean from the inside. It is fast and loud and physical in a way that takes over the parts of your brain that are older than language, and your training runs the show while the rest of you holds on and keeps breathing. We cleared the first corridor in under a minute, 3 Kroth down. Diaz had a cut along her left forearm that she had not noticed yet. I had at least 1 cracked rib from where a limb had connected before I ended that particular conversation. I breathed through it carefully and kept moving. You always breathe through it. That is what you do. Pain is information. You take note of it, and you continue. Cargo Bay 7 was sealed from the inside, which was the first good sign. It meant someone was still alive, and still thinking clearly enough to lock a door. I knocked. 3 short, 2 long. The pattern that the Human Rescue Services had standardized years ago because it translates simply across species. We are here. We are the ones you called. The door is safe to open. Nothing for a moment. Then, through the thick door, a sound. Soft and layered and harmonic, a Velhari distress tone shifting carefully into something that might have been a question. Something that sounded like, "Is it really you?" "We are human," I said, loud enough to reach them. "U.S. Perseverance. You sent a distress call." We answered. 5 more seconds of quiet. Then the lock disengaged. There were 22 of them inside. Velhari are beautiful in the way that things built for gentleness are beautiful. 6-limbed and softly luminous, their light coming from beneath the surface of their skin, in shifting patterns that reflect what they feel. Right now most of that light was dim and flickering at the edges in the patterns that mean fear, that mean we have been frightened for a long time. They were holding on to each other in the center of the bay, and every one of them turned to look at us when the door opened. I was aware, in that moment, of how we must appear to them. Covered in the evidence of the last few minutes, armored, moving in the way of creatures built for a high-gravity world, upright and solid and breathing air calibrated for a planet that had been trying to produce something capable of surviving it for millions of years. One of them moved toward us, young, barely adult by Velhari measurements, their secondary limbs still reaching their full length, their bioluminescence pulsing nervously with every step. They were clearly frightened. They came forward anyway. There is a specific kind of strength in doing something while you are afraid of it, and it is the only kind that I think actually counts. "You came," they said in careful galactic standard, choosing each word deliberately. "We sent the call, but the observers said. They said it was a total loss. We did not think." They stopped. Their light flickered. "We did not think anyone would come." I looked at them. At the marks on their limbs from holding each other in the dark. At 4 eyes watching me like I was something that did not fit into the shape of the world they had understood before today. "You called," I said. We answered. Their light steadied. Not much, but enough to see. Behind me, Okonkwo was already moving through the group in that quiet, unhurried way of his, speaking in a low, even voice, running his scanner, figuring out who needed attention first. He had a gift for making frightened people, regardless of species, feel like the situation had edges, like it could be managed, like someone was in charge who knew what they were doing. He moved through fear like water through rock, steadily, until something opened. "Elu," the young one said. "That is my name. I was the ship's cartographer. I was mapping the outer reach when they came." A pause. Their light dimmed again. "There are more of us. The Kroth commander took 9 of us to the rear command center." "We know," I said. He broadcast to the observers. Alu's voice was careful. He said you would not reach that room. I checked my charge. My rib reminded me it was unhappy with recent events. He has never met us before, I said. The rear command center was at the end of a corridor that the Kroth had arranged to their advantage. Sections of torn hull plating turned into rough walls, 3 of their people stationed along the way, and at the far end, the sealed blast door behind which the commander waited, with 9 Velhari and a broadcast antenna still transmitting to every observer ship in range. His voice came through the ship's speakers in flat, translated galactic standard as we moved up the corridor. The humans will not reach this room. They are soft creatures. They bleed the same as any other. This ends as everything ends. Petrov, who had been pleasantly chatty all morning, went quiet. In 4 years of working alongside him, I had learned that this was more concerning than anything he said out loud. Diaz, he said, in a voice that was very calm and very level. Left corridor? Right side, she confirmed, already moving. I have the center, I said. I will say only this about what happened next. The Kroth commander was everything his reputation said he was. He was powerful and fast and completely without hesitation, and he fought like something that had faced every serious threat his world had produced, and walked away from all of them. He was not used to being stopped. Nothing in his life had ever stopped him. His life had not included us. We come from a world that never stopped trying to end us. For millions of years it threw things at us, cold and disease and creatures that should have been able to win. And we did not stop. We adapted. We learned. We held on with a stubbornness that probably looks, from the outside, like something beyond reason. We took damage and we stayed standing. We bled and we kept moving. We breathed through the pain because 9 people were behind that door, and they had sent their call into the empty dark and we had answered it, and that answer meant something. It meant everything. The commander fell. The door opened. 9 Velhari, huddled in the far corner of the command center, looked up at us. Their light had almost gone out entirely. Then Diaz stepped through the door, this enormous, capable, slightly terrifying woman with a cut on her arm she still had not addressed. And she held out her hands the way you do when you want something small, and frightened to understand that you are not a threat. And the Velhari light came back. Slowly, then all at once, like sunrise, Petrov started humming something under his breath, an old song, simple and low. He did not explain why. 3 of the Velhari nearest to him seemed, without any apparent reason, to find it soothing. That is Petrov. He contains contradictions. The evacuation took 40 minutes. Okonkwo worked through it with the same steady focus he brought to everything, moving from person to person, making sure no one was left behind and no one was being missed. Diaz carried 3 Velhari at once when the passage became difficult, holding them as carefully as you would hold something valuable and irreplaceable, which they were. I managed the corridor checks and the head count and the communication with the Perseverance, keeping everything moving. Alu stayed close to me through most of it, watching everything with 4 wide eyes, watching the way we moved, the way we communicated without needing to speak much, the way Okonkwo touched someone's arm gently while scanning them, the small human habit of contact that says you are not alone in this even when words are too slow. When we reached the docking collar and began moving the survivors across to our ship, Alu stopped. They looked back at the serenity of stars, at the holes in its hull, at what was left of the place they had been before tonight changed everything. Then they looked at me. The observers called it a total loss, Alu said. The observers were wrong. They are very old species. They have seen many things. A pause. The bioluminescence shifted through something that I was beginning to recognize as the Velhari expression for a question that matters. Why do you answer calls that no one else answers? You could have stayed away. Everyone else did. I thought about Earth for a moment. I thought about what it looks like from space, blue and white and very small and very far from anything. I thought about everything that world put our ancestors through. I thought about creatures moving in the dark beyond the edge of firelight, about winters that should have been the end of everything, about illness and disaster, and the long, slow grind of a planet that was not designed with human survival in mind. I thought about how every single one of those things failed, how our ancestors showed up the next morning anyway, and the morning after that, until eventually the things in the dark started being afraid of what was walking toward them instead. I thought about what that process made us, what it made me, why I am standing on a broken ship in the middle of deep space with a cracked rib, and someone else's problem on my hands, and no desire at all to be anywhere else. Because a very long time ago, I said, something bigger and stronger than us sent a distress call from our own world. The universe did not answer. No one came. I looked at Alu. So we decided that we would learn to answer for it, so that no one else would have to send a call into the dark and get silence back. Elu was quiet for a long moment. Their light moved in slow, complex patterns that I did not have the vocabulary to read fully, but felt like something significant was happening behind those 4 eyes. Then, from the Perseverance's communication system, first one signal, then another, then all of them together. Every observer vessel that had been holding position in the dark and watching and recording and sending condolences, the Charathi Collective, the Perevian Concordat, the Yenli Observers, 7 other species who had come to document what they believed would be the end of this story and were now, apparently, rethinking what kind of story it was. One word, galactic standard, transmitted across every open channel, one voice joining another until it was not a word anymore, but something closer to a chorus. Acknowledged. I got back to my coffee when we returned to the ship. It was cold. It tasted like old metal and poor choices. I drank it anyway, standing at the observation window, watching the stars. Behind me I could hear Okonkwo finishing his work in the medical bay, his voice low and even as he spoke to the Velhari in his care. I could hear Diaz finally letting someone look at the cut on her arm and complaining about it loudly, which meant she was fine. I could hear Petrov still humming that song with no explanation given, or apparently required. 31 people were alive who had not expected to be. The coffee was cold, my rib ached, my hands needed washing. It had been a good day. We always say that after. Not because everything was clean or easy or without cost, but because the call came in, and we answered it, and at the end of it the people who needed help were still breathing. That is enough. That has always been enough. The stars held still outside the window, the way they always do, indifferent and ancient and impossibly far away. But somewhere in the dark between them, a small ship full of Velhari cartographers and mathematicians and artists was heading for safety, their lights glowing warm again. The universe had been quiet when they called. We were not. We never are.